Good morning and thanks for joining us. I'm Lillian Muli. Now, Nairobi is set to host a major event in Africa's media and marketing calendar, and that's the 25th Annual Pan-African Media Research Organization Conference, happening from the 14th to the 17th of October right here in Nairobi, like I said. And this year's theme, Trust and Truth, the role of media research, is all about helping us better understand what people are watching, listening to, and engaging with across Africa. From the rise of AI to how influencers are changing the ad world, the conference brings together top minds from media, business, and government to explore where the industry is headed and what it means for all of us. And joining me in studio to break it all down are two leading voices. That's Joe Otin. He's the CEO of The Collective. He's also the former president of Pamro. And I'm also joined by Koi Kariuki. She's a senior research manager at Ipsos Kenya. Lady and gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Joe, I'll start with you. You've been closely working with Pamro over the years. What does this 25th edition mean, not just for the continent, but for us here in Kenya?
Well, you know, when Pamro was formed in 1999, it was generally formed by media researchers and people who were more into the science. Obviously understanding that it has a lot of commercial value, especially when you're trying to grow economies and grow industries in the continent. And as time went by, when we had the conference here in 2009, George Waititi was able to bring in quite a number of the advertisers, the marketers, the media owners, and other industry stakeholders that benefit from media research. And as time has gone by, we've had more participation from people like Liana Less, who was the Vice President of Communications for Coca-Cola International. And, people from Diageo have joined us as well to give their insights. And so this year, I think the biggest significance is that not only are all the stakeholders there, including the regulators, but we also have a discussion that is, sort of just running amok across the world, which is around AI. And what AI is going to do for jobs, what AI is going to do to change the industry, and the impact it's going to have on the commercial viability in this part of the world.
Right. Koi, from a research perspective, why is it important to have a Pan-African measurement standard in today's fragmented media environment? And I had mentioned the fact that people are consuming content from different platforms.
I think it's exactly that. I think, as Joe had mentioned, that it's quite important for us to understand how people are consuming media, how we can reach them, how can we engage with them. And, we're a very diverse continent, and one solution for one market can't work across all. And if we want to be generating revenue, we want to be growing even industries through advertising, we need to really understand how are people consuming media, how they're moving across not just legacy media, but also our digital platforms, and how do we engage and monetize with that. So it is very important to keep having these conversations and bringing different minds from the continent, because you'd sit in Kenya thinking this is how people consume media, this is how the media industry is set up. But you go to a different market and they're like, oh no, it's a bit different here. This is how consumers and audiences are engaging. And then now you have insights from some of the more mature media measurement markets globally. They can bring in some of their insights, and how do we adapt and how do we test and see what would work within the continent, and maybe how do they learn from us, on how to engage with audiences, how to develop media industries in their markets. Yeah.
Well said. Now, Joe, in line with this year's theme, let's talk about the relevance of that, especially now.
So yeah, trust and truth, the role of media research. And I think that with the rise of AI and the ability to be able to create really spectacular content, in the hands of good actors, AI will, improve productivity, will increase the speed that people are able to develop ideas, giving them more room for creativity. But in the hands of bad actors, as we've seen, you have deep fakes, you have misinformation campaigns that spread, that become viral. And it's very difficult to be able to distinguish the two. And so the role of media research, becomes even more important to be able to truly understand how consumers feel about brands and how consumers are actually are using media across the various channels. And I think that, when you look at AI and you think about our regulators, I feel that our regulators, and it's felt that our regulators are one step behind when it comes to really being able to protect the industry from bad actors.
Right.
And I think that these are some of the conversations that we're going to have at the conference.
Mm-hmm. We'll get into the conversations, but before that, Koi, when we talk about trust, just again, going back to this year's theme, which is trust and truth, we've seen cases of fake news spreading fast, and this is even on reputable platforms, I must say. Is there a role of research in media credibility?
There is. I mean, I know across some of the other...
I left out building media credibility.
Building media credibility. Yeah, no, so I think in previous conferences there have been actual papers and people discussing, the role of fake media and fake news, and how is it that we are able to identify it. And I think some of the discussions that we need to have as an industry is how do we verify whatever information that we get, what tools are there, what measures do we have to go through, even from a regulatory perspective, before you release information. So I think it's still in its nascent stages, and it's still something that we need to discuss, but definitely something that's important in the media research space.
Yeah, and also I guess the backdrop of that, just leaving alone the fake news, the evolving of Kenyan media, we've seen it fast evolve, and we're talking about moving from primetime news, which back in the day was the big deal, really, to people now, leaning more towards YouTube shows, TikTok, especially when you look at the influencers also just going out there and reporting as well. How are you tracking these shifts in audience behavior in terms of consumption of the information based on the content that's being generated? How are you tracking these shifts?
There are very many ways to track it. So one of the ways is really just asking people, what is it that you've been engaging with yesterday, today? You can even look at now the various content creators that they follow. But at the same time, you need to layer that also with things like social listening. Which platforms, which influencer platforms are growing, which creator platforms are growing, and which, what is trending at the same time, and now tie that back and say, okay, if this is what we're seeing is trending, how does it compare with other media? And yeah, that's basically how we want to look at it.
Okay.
If I may add, I mean, this conversation of from prime time to my time has been going on across the world since I got into media research. And it's happening across the world where at a certain point in our history, people would gather around the television in the evening, to watch television, have dinner, watch television. Now this has changed where everybody's looking at their own device, and they're basically consuming it that way. And so what Koi mentioned and what is very much in the minds of most of the researchers and marketers at this point in time is the cross-media measurement. And so the various forms of cross-media measurement, involves passive research. Koi talked about the declarative research, but there's also the passive research. And the passive research includes things like TV boxes, includes things like cookies and apps in mobile devices, and also devices that you can carry with you that will measure what you're consuming at any time of the day, 24 hours a day.
Moving away from that to the advertising scene, and Joe, you've worked closely with brands. How has the Pan-African advertising scene changed, especially now with creators and influencers in the mix?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the creators and influencers basically came and ate the advertisers' lunch. And what's now beginning to happen is that AI is coming to slap the savor out of the creators' mouths. But I think at the end of the day, we're all working together in an industry to be able to improve some return on investment for marketers. And so what we're seeing is that digital indeed is growing in this part of the world, but it's growing slower than it has in the West. We're talking about 28% advertising expenditure on digital right now. majority of that is actually going to coming from small brands rather than the bigger brands, which means that 72% is still going to traditional.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a surprise, considering that more than 58% of the nation is continuously, regularly using their mobile devices or the internet. So you'd expect that there'd be more money going towards digital advertising.
Let's talk about the thinking behind that, the fact that traditional media is still getting a chunk of the money.
Well, yes, indeed. I think the number one is that we're relatively slow to move our budgets because we'd like to have some more verified and proven measures before we actually move our budgets. Number two is that media research hasn't necessarily given us the granularity that we need to be confident about those kind of moves. And so we used to have, in Kenya, we used to have some really good media research. And unfortunately, the industry body and the Joint Industry Committee failed at some point. So we don't have the granularity that we've always had. In markets where you have the granularity, when you have the clarity, you start to see more deliberate moves towards where the audiences are. So,
right.
It's only a matter of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Koi, in terms of research and helping marketers and media owners navigate the changing consumer behavior, we've talked about different consumer habits in terms of consumption, advertising trends as well changing. So research and its role in navigating this very dicey environment right now in terms of especially media owners' return on investment and how to navigate this very delicate season. Yeah.
I think, and again, I'll just go back to Pamro. There's a reason it's quite important. It brings together practitioners across the board, so researchers, media houses, media agencies, and it has to be a collaborative effort. As Joe had mentioned, the Joint Industry Commission, that is one way in which we can get that level of granularity, because it's not... It's not cheap, let me just say that. It requires a lot of investment and collaborative investment across the board if we want to get to that level of granularity. The ideal situation would be for us to have passive measurement, for us to be able to pick up everything that you're exposed to, be it radio, TV, even out of home, you can use GPS, obviously with consent. We've got GDPR guidelines to follow, and also online content. And we've done quite a few pilots. We've actually done some with Joe in the past and tried to present some of the findings in the Pamro conferences. And also spoken with some of the larger players in the advertising industry and also media houses. But it has to be a collaborative effort. So at least we now make sure that we have good measurement across the board, across media. And now that we've got lots of big media houses, such as yourselves, tapping into digital, Citizen Digital and the likes, how do we make sure we get the best, the best yumminess, I can say, out of all the media consumers? Yeah.
And Joe, in terms of the rise of digital influencer-driven and AI-powered platforms, let's talk about how media planning is evolving and whether research is keeping pace.
Well, yeah.
I know, Koi talked, of course, about the affordability, this being a very expensive affair, but in terms of keeping pace and this, needing to be a collaborative effort as well, first of all, is there collaboration and is research keeping pace?
Well, let's talk about the joint industry committees again. And when we've had joint industry committees since the 90s. Having evolved, which include the media houses, advertising agencies, and research companies, and of course the marketers, very important. And when that starts to fall apart, what you tend to have is a lot of mistrust and everybody, just playing for themselves. Yeah. And when that starts to happen, then you start to have a situation where, from double-digit advertising growth, we saw over more than 16 years. To a point where we saw stagnation, and now we're beginning to see a decline in advertising. So it's only when we come together and start to work closely together, look at the data, and ensure that we're able to invest in high-quality data, that we can actually start to see better growth. And I think that what we've seen in the West and the developed nations is that they're able to put a tremendous amount of investment behind, as an industry, being able to collect perhaps an advertising levy and be able to put in a tremendous amount of money behind research, which then enables them to look at the return in investment, and therefore, with better measures, you're then able to put better investments into it.
Yeah, we've talked about return on investment, cross-platform measurement, and Koi, to you, what are the biggest gaps you see in media research when you put in these two elements?
I think at the moment we've got the way in which you'd buy digital media. The likes of Meta and everything, they'll give you their numbers, they'll tell you how many people reach this, impressions, etc. It's a very different way in which we'd measure more of our traditional media. So trying to marry those two different audience numbers and say, okay, how many people really saw my ad, or how many people are really exposed to it? And then there's the other aspect, which would be like, okay, yes, they saw it, but did they connect with it? Did it actually mean anything to them? So there are two levels. There's one that's access. How do we measure how many people are accessing? And the second level is, was there any ROI in terms of maybe I wanted people to buy my brand, I wanted people to consider me. So there's that next level. So at this point in time, we've got very kind of segmented approaches to understand that whole journey across digital, traditional media, and then the ROI. In an ideal situation, we'd have everything passively done. And then you'd be able to see, this person was on my TikTok, then they were tuning in for this show on Citizen TV, they were in transit, they were listening to this podcast, and we had an ad there. And we'd be able to see this is how many impressions, real impressions, we actually got from this person. Yeah. And then if you want, you can just send a survey and say, did you buy this, or are you considering this? Mm-hmm. So having like a one kind of loop through a system, I think that would be the ideal position to be in.
Right. Yeah. And to both of you, the conference hosts keynote speakers, including Royal Media Services CEO Wachira Waruru. Maybe to you, Joe, and also Koi, give us a glimpse of some of the sessions and speakers this year. We've got very engaging panel discussions I've seen there on the poster, and including some keynote speakers as well. Give us a glimpse.
Yes. Well, in fact, we're really grateful to Royal Media Services for the support, and also that we're really looking forward to Wachira Waruru's keynote speech, and the reason for that, Lillian, is because Wachira gives very few speeches, and and every time he does, they're absolutely spectacular. And so we're really looking forward to that. And I know he's going to be addressing some major things about the legacy of media, and how research is having an impact on it, and what the future will look like. And so we also have CMOs, the foremost CMOs in the country, Rosalind Gishuru from KCB, Zizwe Wundler from Safaricom, and Mark Mugisha from Kenya East Africa Breweries. And, if you want to know where the industry is going to go, you need to talk to the people who are making those key decisions, especially around budgets, especially about, some of their key priorities. And so here you have a group of guys, guy and ladies, who will be discussing what some of their key priorities are, and, what they would really want from media research. And I think that's, and indeed, how ROI is affecting some of their branding strategies. We have another really interesting panel, and this is made up of veterans from the advertising world. People like Lenny Nganga from Saracen, Samantha Kiprui from Dentsu. We have Miriam Kagwa, the acting CEO of WPP Scan Group, and Mike Otieno of Wowzy. And one of the things you'll see from all these guys is that they've been in the industry for so long that they were involved in media research from the days they actually used to draw spreadsheets using rulers.
Yeah, and yet it's a good blend, because with Wowzy, this is a COVID baby. This is literally, I think, a company that's just about 4 years old.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. So now we're talking about the guys who were there when it was like, okay, paper and pen, to the point where we started to use Excel, to a point where we went to Telmar and started to use more sophisticated software, to a point where now you've got all this really sophisticated software integrated with artificial intelligence. And Wowzy is so much, sort of integrated with AI, in terms of being able to manage, creators, content creators, and influencers to be able to provide some ROI.
Koi, on the same? What are you most excited about in terms of the discussions, the keynote speakers?
Honestly, just hearing the points of views from the CMOs and from the agencies, just because things have changed so much. And if I think of myself as an individual, a media consumer, and the creator economy. I think there's so much potential that's there. And how do they think about marrying that with traditional media, which, as Joe had mentioned, is where they're spending a lot of their money.
Right.
So those insights, I think that's what I'm excited to listen to.
And maybe just one more. I mean, I think there, to kick off the conference, we've got Charles Marito of Google, Sub-Saharan Africa. And he'll be giving us his view in terms of what are the priorities of this really massive tech company. And I think that it has such an impact on every single one of us in the industry, whether you're a media house, whether you're an advertising agency, whether you're a marketer, or whether you're a media researcher. And I think that, so his point of view and his representation of what Google is thinking, I think will be key. But we will be welcomed by the PAS, Stephen Isaboke of ICT and Broadcasting.
Right.
And I think this is important that the regulators are involved, because they need to hear the points of view that are not coming out only out of Kenya, but are coming out of the region. We have some papers from Japan. We have a paper from Russia. We have a paper from other parts of the world as well.
Right. And talking about gathering leaders from across the world, we've got Africa, Europe, Asia, and the Americas under one roof in this event. What's the thinking behind involving such a global mix, and how does that benefit the African media landscape?
Well, yeah, I think we are. There's actually one point in our economy that we made a leapfrog, a huge leapfrog, and this was from terrestrial telephones to mobile telephones, and I think whilst we were still at about 15% of terrestrial telephones, landlines, basically, penetration, we went to 100% mobile in no time. This was leapfrogging. We did this faster than the rest of the world had done in terms of from start to finish. But in many cases we tend to be maybe a step behind. And I think that having an involvement of international players talking about what they're doing in their parts of the world is really key for us to be able to pick up learnings. And also to see how we can adapt some of these tools that are, to a more African, to a better African setting. And so over the years, we have been able to, really push the envelope, based on what we're hearing around passive. I think what we're doing now in artificial intelligence is definitely, some of the key things that are happening.
Koi, you had mentioned as we start to close, in terms of international players, what we can learn from them. But what can they learn from us? What have you observed over the years in terms of the growth that we're talking about when we look perhaps at the global arena here locally? What are the wins? What do we have to celebrate?
I think when we look at some of the international economies and international media industries, there's a lot of structure and the way in which they get things done. I think because, when people now come to the continent, they may think, we just apply that structure. I mean, people have brought the same tools, brought them here and said, let's run with it. And it doesn't work. So I think there's a lot they can learn about understanding different cultures. How do you understand different creative solutions to get things done? How do we need to tweak our current measurement tools now to suit the Kenyan audience or to suit the African audience? And then how do we leverage existing tech? So, the fact that Joe had mentioned, yes, we moved to landlines to mobile phones. The mobile phone is very key across the continent. So how do we use that? And given that we know feature phones probably make about 50% plus of what people are using, how do we adapt our tools to that? So I think it's more about creative thinking, creative problem solving that they can think about, and then take that critical thinking now back to their markets, and how do we tap into maybe smaller niche audiences in their markets using similar thinking. To you both, as we get details on how to register, by the way, today is D-Day, if you plan to attend. You've both talked about regulation, and we know there's a lot of issues around regulation, particularly on platforms such as TikTok, as well as, of course, influencers and digital creators having concerns around tax issues as well. Regulation and the gaps that lie therein, and where to find common ground as regards the concerns we're seeing. Across the world, there's a lot of regulation, especially on platforms such as TikTok, but there's a serious concern here
as regards regulation of some of these platforms. I'll have both of you speak into that.
Well, yeah, and I think that's really one of the purposes of the conference, because there's there's more regulation that's happening in South Africa. There's different types of regulation that are happening in Nigeria. And then when you go to the developed world, the regulations are actually quite strong. In fact, you're finding, and I don't mean strong in terms of holding back the industry, but more strong for the purposes of promoting the industry. And if you look at what's happening now with AI, you've got different rules that are happening in the United States of America based on the left-leaning sort of bias of the language models. You go to Russia and China, and they're saying that they want their language models to reflect their point of view. And so you see regulators really being in tune with what's going on, especially from a more complicated technology perspective, which is now what we really need to bring in here. And so from us sharing our experiences from different nations, I think we can start to help each of our countries and each of our players be able to promote the right kind of policies.
Koi, on the same?
I think, the tax issue, that's something that popped up, I think, was it a couple of months ago for creators in Kenya specifically. And I think it's a very good platform. I think Pamro is a very good platform to discuss that and figure out, okay, if these are the regulations, does it work for us, does it not work for us? And again, having the ministry present is good for those discussions. But also, how do we work with them? How do we problem solve? If these are the guidelines that have been set for us, what opportunities exist, not just within Kenya, but now how do I reach other creators and other audiences who are already watching my content across the African continent? Right. So I think there's still room to figure out ways in which the creators can grow their income by understanding what the regulations are that won't budge, and those that they can influence through such a conference.
And we're starting to close now. So to you, Joe and Koi, first of all, to you, Joe, registration for the event. Where is the event, and your parting remarks?
Okay. So you can go and register on the Pamro website, which is Pamro, PAMRO.org. And the registration fee for non-members is $500. For members is $450. And we've been having this conference since this is the 25th conference since 1999. And we've had it in the last time we had it. The last venue was Casablanca, so it's a real pleasure to be hosting it this year here. So the event's going to be at Kempinski, and we have a wonderful program that starts on Sunday with a cocktail a welcoming cocktail to really bring all the participants together and have a nice networking opportunity that's sponsored by Ipsos. And then the conference proper starts on Monday with the PS opening the conference and the Google Charles Marito's keynote speech. It goes on, at the end of the day, we'll have a networking dinner. Pre-dinner drinks are sponsored by Nielsen. The networking dinner is sponsored by EABL. So this gives us, again, an opportunity to sort of let our hair down and just get to to talk to people, in a very free environment after the very serious discussions. The next day, the conference again runs throughout the whole day, and pre-dinner drinks are sponsored by EABL, and the gala dinner with the award ceremony, where we'll be handing out Achievement of the Year awards, we'll be handing Best Paper awards, and that kind of thing. That's sponsored by DSTV Media Sales. And so we're really looking forward to having not just some serious discussions, but also being able to sort of, in a more friendly environment and conversational environment, be able to sort of network and close some deals.
Koi?
I think one thing I like about the Pamro conferences is the networking aspect. You get to meet people from across the continent and across the globe as well. So if you can, please do sign up. The side meetings that happen, when you meet on Sunday, like, oh, you're from here. Oh, this is what you do. Okay, can we have a meeting at lunchtime or tea time? Between the presentations on Monday and Tuesday. So there's a lot of business that gets generated there, and a lot of referrals that get generated there. But again, if you're not able to attend, please do engage. As Joe had mentioned, we do have rates for members and non-members. So on the Pamro website, you can register as a member, and you do get access, to presentations, from conferences to country reports. So at least you can start engaging with that information, see who else is a member, and then next year, for the next conference, you'll now be ready. You pay your discounted rate, and take it from there.
Actually, I have a question here that's coming in. I must really ask you this with the permission of my director, very briefly as we close. When you look at the continent, who is getting it right? Who is the poster child of where we should be as a continent, in your opinion? Looking at the continent, of course, Kenya involved. Who do you think is a leader in this race?
Well, I thank you so much for not asking who is perfect. Yeah. Because none. There are no countries that are perfect. And I think at one point Kenya was looked at as the poster child. Why? Because we had crossed. We had the single source research. None of the other countries really had a single source research. It was very consistent. Everybody was involved and everybody bought into it. And so that we were there for a little while. But I'll go back to South Africa, and most of it is because of the amounts of investment that they're able to put into it. They've also had their share of problems, but they're in the process of fixing some of those. But what I was also hearing about yesterday was that they're now investing in AI, AI models that are going to host African languages. Right. Wow. Because considering that most of our LLMs are based on English, you can imagine that there is a bias, based on the English language and the English-speaking peoples. And so Africa's perspective is very much in the background because of the perhaps lack of content. So they have, they're putting in a certain amount of investment into this, which will really be capturing a lot of the current views. And we hopefully will be able to look at how we can capture some of Africa's instinct from previous days by having a lot more quality material.
Quite quickly, you concur? You concur?
I do concur. I do concur, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I've been talking to Joe Otin and Koi Kariuki. Very valuable insights there on the 25th Annual Pamro Media Research Conference, which promises to be a defining moment for Africa's media and marketing industries. I'm Lilian Muli. Have a good day. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Lilian.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks.